When did loving someone become a project with a deadline, a goal, and a hidden spreadsheet? You start out thinking it's just romance, long conversations, promises made with a smile, that comfortable feeling of we'll build it together. And you do build it, you just don't realize what you're building with. Because along with the affection come decisions, and along with the decisions come expenses. And along with the expenses comes a strange logic that nobody calls by name. Yet, everything sounds too beautiful to raise suspicion. It's just an effort now. We'll reap the rewards later. It even sounds like a startup speech, only with a hug at the end. Cynthia walks by smiling, saying that's just how it is. That every beginning requires investment. She speaks like someone who's seen this pattern many times before, but prefers to call it maturity. You agree? Because disagreeing ruins the mood. And nobody wants to ruin the mood when everything is still going well. The bills appear small, almost timid. Subscriptions, upgrades, choices made automatically. Nothing that seems serious. Nothing that deserves a serious conversation. Serious conversation is for those who have already failed. Here, it's still love. Without realizing it, the relationship begins to speak a different language. It's no longer, I feel. It makes sense. It's no longer we want it, it's worth it. Affection becomes an argument, the future becomes a justification, and any discomfort becomes anxiety, saved for later, because now is not the time. It never is. There's always a better plan coming, a phase that will compensate for all of this. That's how the pattern enters, not through the front door, but through the side door, bringing flowers in one hand and receipts in the other. And while everyone else is normalizing it, you continue to believe that love endures. Any spreadsheet, at least at the beginning, and then you go on, thinking it's just a phase that every relationship goes through. This fine-tuning, this alignment that seems mature. But nobody warned you that the pattern works like this. When you realize it, you're already explaining choices you don't even remember making. And it's not because someone told you to. It's because it seemed logical, it seemed normal, it seemed adult. If what I'm saying sounds too familiar, it's worth letting it slip somewhere. Even if it's just a short sentence, just to mark that you recognized the pattern. Sometimes reading another similar story helps you understand that it's not all in your head. And when this kind of conversation continues, it only continues because someone decides to stick around. A simple gesture, like following the channel or reacting to the video, ends up being the quietest way to say, keep talking, this matters. It's not about agreeing, it's about understanding together. Because the more visible this pattern becomes, the less it can hide behind pretty romance, organized speeches, and well-intended promises. And this is only the beginning. And then the word fair begins to appear with strange frequency. It doesn't arrive as an accusation, but as organization. Who pays this? Who covers that? Who earns more now? Who compensates later? All said calmly, with apparent maturity, as if it were merely logistics. But nothing disappears. Each gesture is stored somewhere invisible, a silent memory that serves not to express affection, but to demand future retribution. Love is translated into small, emotional balances as if each action had an associated market value. No one talks about debt, but everyone feels it when they're in debt. And no one talks about power, but it starts circulating around the house, just like the electricity bill. Whoever pays more starts making more decisions. Whoever earns less starts explaining themselves more, not because someone demanded it, but because the environment calls for it. The pattern doesn't need direct orders. It works best when everything seems like a conscious choice. When you yourself offer to balance something you never asked to be weighed, conversations become filled with numbers and devoid of listening. One person talks about budget, the other responds with feeling. One thinks they're being responsible, the other feels diminished. And neither is wrong, which is even worse. Because when there's no clear villain, resentment grows silently. Each purchase becomes a symbol. It's not the object, it's what it represents. Recognition, freedom, control, security, all of that mixed together in any old bag. Gradually, that parallel accounting emerges that no one admits to keeping, but everyone consults mentally. I did this for us. I held on to that for us. Phrases that seem loving, but carry hidden receipts. The relationship becomes an informal partnership where no one signed a contract, but everyone knows who's in the red. And the most curious thing is that all this happens while the couple still says they're doing well. Still laugh together, still post photos. Still believe they're on the right track, just going through a more demanding phase. Cynthia observes everything with that calm smile of someone who calls it emotional maturity. She praises the effort, validates the sacrifice, says that adult relationships are like that. And you believe her because it makes sense. You just don't realize that little by little, affection is being used as currency. Not to buy things, but to gain moral advantage. The problem was never the money. The problem is what it allows when it enters uninvited. And when you realize it, you're already trying to prove you're being fair instead of trying to be supportive. If this part gave you a subtle pang of sadness, write just one word in the comment. Balance. Sometimes naming the pattern already changes how it weighs. And then those conversations begin that no one acknowledges as argument. They come in calm voices and rehearsed phrases. We need to get on a straight track. Get on a straight track? What? No one really knows, but it sounds like an adult thing to say. The table becomes an improvised office. The cell phone becomes an emotional calculator, and love tries to explain itself using graphs. Spreadsheets open, apps flashing, goals with deadlines that don't respect people's time. Everything is very organized for a discomfort that isn't technical. One person talks in percentages, the other in exhaustion. One talks in forecasts, the other in feelings. And both feel like they're speaking different languages in the same house. Logic enters as if it were a universal solution. If you organize, you solve it. If you plan, you calm down. Except it doesn't calm down. Because nobody is anxious about the number. They're anxious about the meaning. The number has only become a mouthpiece. When one person points to the spreadsheet, the other hears judgment. When one person talks about limits, the other hears lack of love. Not because anyone wants to hurt, but because the pattern has already placed everyone in a fixed role. The responsible one, the sensitive one, the controller, the impulsive one. Labels that start out practical and end up burdensome. Conversations almost always end the same way. There's no shouting, no slamming doors. There's silence. A silence full of unspoken phrases, of conclusions drawn midway. Each person leaves thinking the other understands nothing. Not about money, not about love. And this feeling is corrosive because it undermines trust without making a sound. You start choosing your words with excessive care, avoiding certain topics, postponing conversations that should have already happened, all to maintain a peace that costs too much. The curious thing is that on the outside, everything seems to work. The bills keep getting paid, the routines continue, the relationship continues, but inside, something shifts. Dialogue becomes negotiation. Affection becomes a defense mechanism. The future becomes constant pressure. And the more one tries to resolve things methodically, the more distant the feeling of being on the same side becomes. It's like trying to fix an emotional noise by adjusting the volume when the problem is the wrong music playing. Cynthia appears at times like these with advice that sounds modern and practical. She talks about maturity, partnership, and sharing responsibilities. Everything seems right, but the side effect never comes with the advice. She validates control as care, coldness as clarity, and detachment as focus. And you accept it because you need to believe there's a right way to make it work, that if you follow the process, the feeling will follow. Pattern loves this promise. Without realizing it, the couple begins to measure their relationship by the efficiency of their conversations, not by the quality of their bond. If it didn't work out, it's because someone didn't explain things well, didn't organize things properly, didn't try hard enough. Love becomes something that needs to be managed, optimized, revised. And while all this is happening, nobody asks the obvious. When did feeling become a problem to be solved? If this part brought back that specific memory, that conversation that ended nowhere and kept echoing, write it in the comments. Alignment, sometimes recognizing the pattern, is the first step in understanding why so much alignment still leaks. Everything is out of place. And then this logic takes hold uninvited. Whoever produces more, starts making more decisions, not because it was agreed upon, but because it seems natural. Whoever fails starts to owe, even when there is no formal debt. The relationship begins to be seen as a company in crisis, one of those that feigns stability while cutting costs internally. Someone is always holding the fort. Someone is always weighing down, and nobody realizes how sharp these words become over time. Affection diminishes, but doesn't disappear all at once. It becomes something conditional, an emotional bonus tied to performance. If everything goes well, affection appears. If something goes wrong, it vanishes, not out of malice, but out of exhaustion. Love becomes a reward for productivity, and this changes everything without changing anything visible. On the outside, the couple still exists. On the inside, each one begins to calculate when they can relax, when they need to prove their worth, when they need to compensate. It's at this stage that phrases emerge, said half jokingly, half serious. Comments about effort, about who does more, about who could do better. Nobody calls it demanding, they call it reality. Nobody calls it pressure, they call it responsibility. Pattern likes these neutral names. They make it seem like everything is just too adult to be questioned. And when someone tries to talk about feelings, they hear that it doesn't solve anything, as if feeling were an operational error. The relationship begins to function in performance mode. Good days are efficient days. Bad days are unproductive days. There's no room for failure without explanation. There's no rest that doesn't generate guilt. Everything needs a reason, justification, a return. And the cruelest part is that this usually comes with talk of partnership. We're a team, but teams also discard players when performance drops. And nobody wants to admit they're experiencing something like that at home. Cynthia appears as someone who offers language for this moment. She speaks of a winning mentality, of growth, of not carrying anyone on your back. She transforms coldness into clarity, demands into maturity, distance into focus. And everything sounds so coherent that you begin to doubt yourself when you feel the lack of something simpler, something that doesn't need to be earned all the time. Without realizing it, the couple enters a strange cycle. The more they try to save the relationship methodically, the more it slips away. The more they try to organize it, the less light it becomes. Love turns into something that needs to be repaid every month, with emotional interest accumulating silently, and no one realizes that they are using the very mechanism that is killing the relationship to try to keep it alive. It's like trying to put out a fire by throwing paper on it. There's no breakup yet, no decision yet. There's only this constant wear and tear, this feeling of always owing something that's never clear, and that shapes how they look at each other, touch each other, listen to each other. It's not that the love is over, it's just become too conditioned to breathe. If this part reminded you of that feeling of always trying to cope, write it in the comments. Performance, sometimes noticing the pattern begins when we admit that love shouldn't feel like a results report. And then comes the phase of the professionalized solution. Courses, books, gurus, videos saved to watch later. If it's not working, logic dictates a lack of technique, a lack of method, a lack of the right tools. The couple begins to treat what they feel as if it were a poorly configured system, something that, with the correct adjustment, will finally run smoothly. More control here, more rules there, a new metric to track the evolution of a. It seems productive, it seems responsible, it even seems hopeful. The problem is that feelings don't respond well to commands. The more you try to measure them, the more they elude you. The more you try to organize them, the more artificial they become. Romance begins to be managed as an inefficient process. Time spent together becomes an investment. Rest becomes a risk. Improvisation becomes a mistake. Everything needs to have a purpose, a return, a learning experience. Even silence needs to be productive, and when it isn't, it becomes a sign of failure. Conversations take on the language of personal performance, growth, alignment, continuous improvement, beautiful words that sound mature but create an invisible pressure. Because if there's a method, there's blame when it doesn't work. Someone is applying it incorrectly. Someone isn't trying hard enough, and nobody wants to be the bottleneck in their own relationship. So they try harder. More reading, more rules, more attempts to fix something that perhaps wasn't broken, just worn out. Cynthia appears at this stage as someone who always has a new reference point, a concept, an idea, a healthier way of making things work. She talks about self-control, emotional intelligence, not repeating old patterns. Everything seems elevated, almost therapeutic. But, without realizing it, the couple begins to replace presence with technique, listening with strategy, vulnerability with well-trained emotional performance. And this creates a distance that is difficult to name because everything seems to be being done the right way. The more you manage, the less you feel. Touch becomes calculated, affection becomes scheduled, spontaneous laughter becomes the exception. Not because love has ended, but because it has become too surrounded, too protected, too regulated. Pattern loves this moment because now nobody questions whether the path makes sense. Everyone just wants to adjust the process to achieve the promised result. And the most ironic thing is that the relationship doesn't break down for lack of effort. It breaks down from overmanagement, from treating something alive as if it were a spreadsheet, from believing that every discomfort is a flaw to be corrected and not a signal to be heeded. The couple continues trying to optimize what perhaps only needed less pressure, fewer goals, less expectation of constant performance. But admitting this seems like giving up, and nobody wants to give up when they've already invested so much. There is no endpoint yet. There is only this silent accumulation, this feeling of always trying to get it right and never quite arriving, of always learning and never resting. Something starts to become too heavy to be called love, but too organized to be called a problem. And this prepares the ground for decisions that haven't even been thought through yet, only postponed. If this part sounded familiar to you, write it in the comment. Overmanaged. Sometimes understanding the pattern begins when we accept that not everything can be optimized. It should be. And there's no dramatic scene to mark this moment. No shouting, no slamming doors, no clear villain. 2.2 Just exhaustion. An exhaustion that doesn't come from fighting, but from constant maintenance. From waking up already thinking about what needs to be adjusted, aligned, resolved. The couple looks at each other and realizes, with a strange delay, that they've become partners with someone they once loved. Not by conscious decision, but by accumulation. Small, repeated choices, all reasonable, all justifiable, all exhausting. Respect still exists. Sometimes even a solid friendship. That functional partnership that solves problems, accomplishes tasks, shares responsibilities, but the lightness left without warning. Laughter became rare. Touch became perfunctory. The silence became too full to be comfortable. And nobody knows exactly when this happened, because pattern doesn't arrive breaking everything. It arrives organizing, putting everything in its place until there's no space left to feel without a plan. The relationship didn't end because of a lack of love. That's the hardest part to accept. It ended because it was treated like a business. And businesses fail when they forget why they were created. When purpose becomes performance, when mission becomes goal, when the human element becomes a resource, the couple looks back and sees that they did everything right. They planned, they talked, they tried to improve, they invested time, money, energy, and even so, something was lost along the way. Not through negligence, but through excessive, misdirected zeal. Cynthia is no longer as present in this phase. When she appears, it's from afar. A quick comment, a generic validation, an attempt to transform the crisis into marketable learning. She calls it a cycle, a phase, growth. And perhaps it is. But what remains in the body is something else. It's the feeling of having spent too much time trying to manage love instead of living it, of having confused stability with control, security with predictability, partnership with emotional accounting. None of this explodes. Everything just settles down. Like a company that continues operating without a soul, fulfilling contracts, paying bills, maintaining the facade. On the outside, it works. On the inside, nobody remembers why it started anymore. And that's the quietest part of the pattern. When nobody is wrong enough to change, but everyone is tired enough to continue. The couple continues, not because they believe, but because stopping would require admitting that the effort has become a prison. And admitting that seems like a waste. It seems like defeat. So they continue a little longer, trying to recover something they can no longer name. Love still exists somewhere. It just no longer has room to breathe amidst emotional reports, accumulated expectations, and the constant feeling that everything has become an obligation. If this part left you with that hard-to-explain inner silence, write to us. Comments why we started. Sometimes the beginning isn't nostalgia, it's a clue. If you've stayed this far, it's because something in all of this resonated too deeply to ignore. Not like a distant story, but like a pattern we recognize when we stop rushing and pay attention. This kind of conversation only makes sense when it continues, when it's not isolated in a single video. So, if it makes sense for you to follow this space, subscribing is just a simple way to keep this reflection from dying here. It's like saying, without fanfare, keep going. I want to look at this more calmly. If you want to mark that you've reached the end, write it in the comment. Still here, there's no need to explain anything. Those who understand, understand. And if this video captivated you, a like helps keep this type of content circulating for those who are also feeling this strange weight in their relationship, even without knowing how to name it. There's another video right there that follows exactly that line, pulling the same thread from a different angle. It's not a continuation in the traditional sense. It's more like shifting the conversation slightly and noticing that the pattern reappears. If it makes sense, continue from there. Sometimes all we need is to keep looking without rushing to a conclusion.